Hello everyone, welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Aleph. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Kriya Shema, and we will be learning today Emir Tzah Hashem Daf Kuf Gimel Amud Beis. We have some unfinished business here on Kuf Gimel Amud Aleph, so we're really going to be learning a piece of Kuf Gimel Amud Aleph as well as a piece of Kuf Gimel Amud Beis. Now, we've been discussing this I guess I would call it kind of esoteric topic of Piris al Shema. It's not something that we encounter much nowadays. At least I don't see it much. I guess the place where you see the concept of Parisin al Shema the most nowadays is maybe by Ma'ariv, which is something that we're going to discuss today. By Ma'ariv, very often we see somebody came late for Ma'ariv, and all the way at the end of the Ma'ariv, somebody will give a clap, say Baruch Hashem HaMavarach, and people will answer Baruch Hashem HaMavarach L'Olam V'Od. And that is an outgrowth of this minig of Parisin al Shema. Now, if you remember, yesterday we went through the Mishnah Berurah's Hakdama to this Siman, and in his Hakdama, the Chavetz Chaim gave us two different cases of Parisin al Shema, two different minhagim of how Parisin al Shema was done, and they were both couched in the context of Shachris. And then the Mechaber gives us his case of Parisin al Shema. So let's just recap quickly what we know so far about Parisin al Shema. The two cases that the Chavetz Chaim gave us were as follows. Basically, let's imagine a regular, typical Shachris minyan in the morning. Unfortunately, some people come late. So let's say you have a minyan davening Shachris, and you have a few people who come in late. How late do they come in? They come in, let's say, in middle of Birchas Kriya Shema. So now, what have these people missed? Well, they missed a lot of davening, but what dvarim shebekdusha have they missed? The essential dvarim shebekdusha that they have missed is they missed the Chatzi Kaddish after Yishtabach, and they missed Baruch Hu. Now, is there a way for them to make up that Chatzi Kaddish and that Baruch Hu? And that is where Parisin al Shema comes in. Says the Chavetz Chaim in his Hakdama that started on the bottom of Kuf Beis Amud Beis, said the Chavetz Chaim, there were two different prevalent minhagim. One minig was that the minyan that's davening Shachris, they would daven a normal Shachris. So, Berchas HaShachar, Karbonos, Psuki de Zimra, Berchas Kriya Shema, Shtil Shmona Esrei. Okay, typically, right after the Shtil Shmona Esrei, the Chazan would start Chazaras HaShatz. Says the Chavetz Chaim, there was a minig that after the Shtil Shmona Esrei, instead of going right into Chazaras HaShatz, what they would do is they would make an accommodation for the people who came late, and they would give them a way to get the Chatzi Kaddish and the Baruch Hu that they missed. What would they do? Somebody would get up, somebody would say a Chatzi Kaddish. So remember, we just finished the Shtil Shmona Esrei. Now somebody would get up, say a Chatzi Kaddish. He could say a Chatzi Kaddish because it goes back on the Shtil Shmona Esrei. After the Chatzi Kaddish, he'll say Baruch Hu. Now everybody answers Baruch Hashem HaMavarach L'Olam V'Od. And then he would say the first bracha of Birchas Kriya Shema, the bracha of Yoitzer Or, all the way through to Yoitzer HaMa'oros. Why is he saying that bracha? Because, like we explained yesterday, when the Chazan says Baruch Hu as Hashem HaMavarach, and he gives a tzivui, he instructs the tzibur to bench the Rabbeinu Shalom, it's not only to say Baruch Hashem HaMavarach L'Olam V'Od, it's really also to say Berchas Kriya Shema. So this guy, this Chazan, who's being Piris al Shema, he's going to say Chatzi Kaddish, he's going to say Baruch Hu, he's going to say the first bracha of Berchas Kriya Shema, and now the people who came late have acquired the Chatzi Kaddish and the Baruch Hu that they missed. Now, in this case, what would happen next? Next, the Shliach Tzibur would go into Chazaras HaShatz. That's really where they're up to. He would go into Chazaras HaShatz, and now everybody would get Kedusha. So this was one minig of Parson al Shema, and again, what we're trying to accomplish is, we're trying to gain a Chatzi Kaddish and a Baruch Hu for the people who came late. That was minig number one. Says the Chavetz Chaim, there was another minig. This minig is a little bit more mechudish. This minig is much more novel. The second minig was, instead of doing this Parson al Shema right after the Shtil Shmon Esrei, now again, if you do it right after the Shtil Shmon Esrei, so the Chiddush is that you're saying a new Chatzi Kaddish and you're saying a new Baruch Hu. But as far as Kedusha, there's no Chiddush. Because really what you're up to is Chazaras Hashatz. So once you finish the Parson al Shema piece, which is the Chatzi Kaddish, the Baruch Hu, and the first bracha Birkas Kriyishma, now we go back to our regularly scheduled broadcasting, and now the Chazan goes and he says Chazaras Hashatz, and everybody gets Kedusha. So you're not adding in a new Chazaras Hashatz. You're doing the regular Chazaras Hashatz. The second minig is more mechudish, because instead of doing it after the Shtil Shmon Esrei, they did the Parson al Shema all the way at the end of davening, after Aleinu. So what did they do? The Tzibur davened a full normal davening, all the way through to the end of Aleinu, the end of Kaddish after Aleinu. Now they went ahead and they made an accommodation for people who came late. So now they give a klap. They say, let's say, a few psukim from Ashrei to be able to say Kaddish. Then they say a Chatzi Kaddish. Then they say Baruch Hu. Then they say the first bracha of Birkas Kriyishma. And now they go ahead and they say a mini Chazaras Hashatz. They go ahead and they say the first three brachas of Shemona Esrei out loud, together with Kedusha. Now, what's the place for this? This is like a new Chazaras Hashatz. This is an addition. So this is part of Parson al Shema. They did this in order to give the people who came late, and not only they missed Chatzi Kaddish and Baruch Hu, maybe they missed Kedusha as well. So we want to give them a Kedusha. So in order to give them a Kedusha, we have this like extra Chazaras Hashatz. Now, in the simple words of the Mechaber, this additional extra Chazaras Hashatz is a mini Chazaras Hashatz. It's only the first three brachas. The Ramah that we're going to see today is going to say, no. It's not a full Chazaras Hashatz, but it's a full Shemona Esrei. The one who's being Paras al Shema will say the first three brachas together with Kedusha out loud, and then he'll finish the rest of the Shemona Esrei quietly. But he's going to say a full Shemona Esrei. But still, this is it's a new Shemona Esrei. It's a fourth Shemona Esrei in the day. It's not regular Chazaras Hashatz. This minyan already had a regular Chazaras Hashatz. So that's why this minig is more mechudish than the other minig. So those are the two minhagim and the two descriptions of Parson al Shema that the Chavetz Chaim gave us in his Akdama to this Siman. Then we have the Mechaber's case. The Mechaber's case is a much more interesting case, because in the Mechaber's case, there was no minyan that davened Shachris together at all. In the Mechaber's case, what happened is like this. Somebody came to shul, there was no minyan. He davened b'yechidus. Another guy came to shul, there's no minyan. He davened b'yechidus. 10 people came to shul, all at different times, and they all davened b'yechidus. Or maybe 3 of them davened at home b'yechidus v'sikin. But whatever it is, you have 10 people who all davened b'yechidus. Now, since they davened b'yechidus, they didn't have Chatzi Kaddish, they didn't have Baruch Hu, they didn't have Kedusha, they didn't have any of the Dvarim Shebekdusha that typically accompany Shachris. They all davened b'yechidus. Now they're all in shul together. What are they doing in shul? Maybe they came for Daf Yomi. So 10 people came to shul to learn Daf Beis in Masechtas Nazir. They all come into shul and they all say to each other, hey, you aren't by Shachris, you are by Shachris, you are. Hey, none of us were by Shachris this morning. We all davened b'yechidus this morning. Oh, you know what? Let's get together and let's get Chatzi Kaddish, Baruch Hu, and Kedusha. How are we going to do that? Oh, we'll be Parson al Shema. We'll give a klop right now. We'll say a few psukim. We'll say Ashrei. And now we'll have a Chatzi Kaddish. And then we'll say Baruch Hu. And then the Chazan will say the first bracha of Birkas Kriyishma out loud. And then after Yotzer HaMa'oros, he'll start this new Chazaras Hashatz. He'll say the first 3 brachas of Shemoneh Esrei out loud together with Kedusha. Now everybody got Chatzi Kaddish Baruch Hu, and they got Kedusha. And according to the Ramah, the Chazan who's being Paras al Shema will finish the Shemoneh Esrei quietly. I guess he's going to come late to the Daf Shir. But whatever it is, or maybe they'll be mentioned and they'll wait for him. But that's the Mechaber's case. The Mechaber's case, there was no minyan. There never was a minyan. But now the 10 people are together, they want to get the Dvarim Shebekdusha, they can be Paras al Shema. Importantly, we saw in the Mishnah Berurah yesterday on Kuf Gimel Amud Aleph, in Mishnah Berurah's Katan Aleph, that the Radvaz takes tremendous issue with the Mechaber, and the Radvaz says, what? We're going to go make like a new Chazaras HaShatz over here? And meantime, everybody already daven Chakras? So they all daven Chakras, and now we're making a new Chazaras HaShatz? In the eyes of the Radvaz, this is a bracha of HaTorah. So the Radvaz says, no. Radvaz does not like this at all. The Radvaz takes great issue with this. But the Chassam Sofer writes, Chassam Sofer says that the Welt is not like the Radvaz. But they bring down that even according to the Radvaz, if one of the people that are there did not yet daven Shacharis, so you have one guy who didn't daven Shacharis, so beautiful, he'll go be Paras al Shema. He'll be the one who'll say the Chatzi Kaddish, the Baruch Hu, the one bracha of Birchas Kriya Shema, and he'll be the one to say the Chazaras HaShatz. He has to daven Shemoneh Esrei anyway. Now we're going to see today that there's a chiddush anyway, because realize what's going to happen to this guy. He didn't daven Chakras yet. So what's he going to do? He's going to say Chatzi Kaddish Baruch Hu, the first bracha of Birchas Kriya Shema, but he's not going to say Kriya Shema, and he's not going to say the second bracha. Now he's going to daven Shemoneh Esrei. After he daven Shemoneh Esrei, he's got to go back. He's got to say Kriya Shema, and he's got to say the second bracha of Birchas Kriya Shema until Gal Yisrael. But now he can't daven Shemoneh Esrei, so he's not going to be Masmech Geula L'Tfila. So his davening is going to be weird. But we can do that. He can be Paras al Shema, and in this way, everybody gets the Dvarim Shebekdusha. Okay, that's a quick recap. That's where we find ourselves holding. Now, against that backdrop, let's go here on Kuf Gimel Amud Aleph, third line down in the Shulchan Aruch, and let's see the Ramah. Says the Ramah. So the Mechaber said, how are you Paras al Shema? The way you Paras al Shema is Chatzi Kaddish, Baruch Hu, and then the first bracha of Birchas Kriya Shema. And we explained, why do you need the first bracha of Birchas Kriya Shema? Because when the Chazan gives the instruction, Baruch Hu es Hashem HaMavorach, people have to respond. The Mechaber holds, it's not sufficient to respond with Baruch Hashem HaMavorach, Lo'olam V'ed. That's not enough. Because really, the instruction of Baruch Hu es Hashem HaMavorach is an instruction not only on Baruch Hashem HaMavorach, Lo'olam V'ed, but really it's for Birchas Kriya Shema. So says the Mechaber, it's not enough to just say Baruch Hashem HaMavorach Lo'olam V'ed. You have to say at least the first bracha of Birchas Kriya Shema. Says the Ramah, no. Says the Ramah Haga, Va'achshav lo nahagu loymar kol Birchas Yotzer Or. Nowadays, we are not noyig that when you Paras al Shema, you have to say the first bracha of Birchas Kriya Shema, ela rather, Oimrim Kaddish, you say the Chatzi Kaddish, Baruch Hu, of Baruch Hashem HaMavorach Lo'olam V'ed, and that's enough. Okay, so that's the first halacha of the Ramah. The first new halacha that we have here today is that the Ramah takes issue with the Mechaber, and he says that whatever the style of being Paras al Shema, it does not have to include the first bracha of Birchas Kriya Shema. It's sufficient to answer Baruch Hu with Baruch Hashem HaMavorach Lo'olam V'ed. And this machlokes the Mechaber and the Ramah is going to be very critical for the next thing that the Ramah says, where the Ramah is going to speak about Ma'ariv. But right now, in the context of Chakras, we have this machlokes the Mechaber and the Ramah. The Mechaber says, to respond to Baruch Hu as Hashem HaMavorach, you need to include at least the first bracha of Birchas Kriya Shema. If not, in the words of the Akrainim, mechzi kekaifer. You look chas v'chalila like a kaifer. The Chazan is instructing you, Baruch Hu es Hashem HaMavorach, and you are not playing with the rules. You're not responding properly. The Ramah says, no, it's enough to respond with Baruch Hashem HaMavorach Lo'olam V'ed. You don't also need the first bracha of Birchas Kriya Shema. Now, let's remember that there's a very good reason to say like the Ramah. Well, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is there is a negius, there's a bias against saying the first bracha of Birchas Kriya Shema if we don't really need to. Remember, we always say Safik brachas lahakal. We never want to make extra brachas because we're terrified of being over on Loisis Hashem Hashav. We never want to make a bracha she'ein tzricha because we're always worried about bracha levatala. What's the problem with bracha levatala? Loisis Hashem Hashav. What are you saying the Rebbeinu Shalom's name for nothing? So we're always biased against making unnecessary brachas. And let's remember also, the Ramah is responding to the case of the Mechaber. Now, in the case of the Mechaber, you have 10 people here in Shul who all already davened Shacharis. So every single one of them already said Birchas Kriya Shema. So now when you're being Piras al Shema, in order to get Baruch Hu and to get Chatzi Kaddish and to get Kedusha, right? Now you're going to have somebody say the first bracha of Birchas Kriya Shema for the second time. So it's kind of shmektzach a little bit like bracha she'ein tzricha. In the world of the Mechaber, it's absolutely not a bracha she'ein tzricha because without it, mechzi kekayfer, you have to respond to Baruch Hu. But still in all, we kind of have a bias like the Ramah. We don't want somebody to say a bracha for the second time. So the Ramah says, you don't need it. If you respond to Baruch Hu with Baruch Hashem, Hamavarach, Lo'olam Va'ed, that's enough, says the Ramah. Okay, let's take a look here in the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in Dalet, Va'achshav. Nowadays we're not noyig that the Piras al Shema says the first bracha of Birchas Kriya Shema. Why? Sviralon, because we hold the Kevin Sha'oinim Baruch Hashem HaMavarach Lo'olam Va'ed. Once you respond with Baruch Hashem HaMavarach Lo'olam Va'ed, Sulai Mechzi Kekayfer. You take away the problem of Mechzi Kekayfer. It's a sufficient response to Baruch Hu. And he brings a raya. Midi dahavia Birchas HaTorah. What do we do? This doesn't mean Birchas HaTorah that each and every one of us says in the morning. It means the one who's the oila. When somebody has an aliyah and he says Baruch Hu, what happens? He goes up to the Sefer Torah, Baruch Hashem HaMavarach, and everybody responds Baruch Hashem HaMavarach Lo'olam Va'ed. Do they have to respond with Birchas Kriya Shema? No. So we have a precedent that Baruch Hashem HaMavarach Lo'olam Va'ed is a sufficient response. So the Ramah says, so it's a sufficient response here too. Okay, now let's go back into the Ramah. Now the Ramah says another halacha. 4 lines down, Yesh Omrim. Till now, we have been discussing Shacharis. Now jumps in the Ramah with Ma'ariv. Says the Ramah, Yesh Omrim, there are those that say, She Pורסין b'Kriya Shema shel Arvis, that there's a concept of Pórsin al Shema by Ma'ariv Kimoi b'Shachris, just as there is by Shachris. So we have discussed until now Pórsin al Shema by Shachris. Now says the Ramah, there are those that say there's an inyan of Pórsin al Shema by Shachris, by Ma'ariv as well. Okay, take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah is cut in hay. Kimoi b'Shachris, says the Mishnah Berurah, what does this mean? Ritzaina Loimar, let's remember that the Ramah is a commentary on the Mechaber. So the Ramah is reacting to the Mechaber. What was the Mechaber's case of Pórsin al Shema by Shachris? His case was 10 people all davened b'Yechidus. Now they're in shul together, so they want to be Pórsin al Shema in order to gain the Dvarim Shebekdusha of Shachris, namely Chatzi Kaddish after Yishtabach, Baruch Hu, and Kedusha. Now let's plug it into Ma'ariv. By Ma'ariv, let's take the same case, right? The Ramah said, Kimoi b'Shachris. Okay, so let's take the Mechaber's case of Shachris, and let's plug it into Ma'ariv. You have 10 people who all davened Ma'ariv b'Yechidus. Okay, they all davened Ma'ariv b'Yechidus, so they did not get the Dvarim Shebekdusha of Ma'ariv. What are the Dvarim Shebekdusha of Ma'ariv? Well, if you daven Ashkenaz, there is no Chatzi Kaddish before Baruch Hu. If you daven Svard, there is a Chatzi Kaddish before Baruch Hu, but we're going to see in the Mishnah Berurah, that Chatzi Kaddish, it's only based on a minig, and it's a relatively recent minig. They developed a minig that will say a few psukim before Baruch Hu, Shem Alois, we'll say a few psukim. That gives us the right to make a Chatzi Kaddish, so we'll make a Chatzi Kaddish, and then we'll say Baruch Hu. But says the Mishnah Berurah, this is a relatively new minig. So that Chatzi Kaddish is not considered a davar shebekdusha of Ma'ariv, that we have to, do something to allow people to recapture it if they davened b'yechidus and they didn't get it. So let's cast aside that Chatzi Kaddish, whether you daven Ashkenaz or whether you daven Sfard. So there's no Kaddish. Okay, what is there? There's Baruch Hu. What else is there? Is there Kedusha? No, there's no Kedusha by Ma'ariv. There's no Chazar Sachatz by Ma'ariv. So what exactly is the davar shebekdusha of Ma'ariv that would lead you to be person al Shema? Only Baruch Hu. Says the Ramah, there's a yesh oimrim that you could be person al Shema in order to get Baruch Hu. So now again, so what would we do? So let's plug it in to the Mechaber. The Mechaber said, in order to be person al Shema, what do you have to do? Well, first you're going to say a Chatzi Kaddish, but not by Ma'ariv. Not by Ma'ariv, because there's no Chatzi Kaddish to make up. So you have 10 people who all daven Ma'ariv b'yechidus. Now they come into shul together for a daf yomi share, and everybody says, oh, I davened b'yechidus, I davened b'yechidus, I davened, oh, nobody here got Baruch Hu. Okay, let's be Paras al Shema. So in the world of the Mechaber, what you would now do is you would give a klap, the Chazan would say Baruch Hu, everybody would respond, Baruch Hashem HaMavarach La'olam V'ed, and now, since in the world of the Mechaber, Baruch Hashem HaMavarach La'olam V'ed is not a sufficient response to Baruch Hu, now the one who's being Paras al Shema, the Chazan of this mini Ma'ariv, would now say the first bracha of Birchas Kriya Shema Shal Arvis out loud. So he would say the bracha of Ma'ariv Aravim out loud. So what would Parson al Shema look like by Ma'ariv in the world of the Mechaber? The 10 people come to shul for the daf yomi shir. They realize that they all daven Ma'ariv b'yechidus. You give a clap. Baruch Hashem HaMavarach. Baruch Hashem HaMavarach La'olam V'ed. The Chazan goes, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher b'devar Ma'ariv Aravim b'chokma b'zech sharmu v'svinim shadi yitim v'maklev v'zazmanim v'sadas kichavim, all the way through. Kelch avikarim tavidim melech aleinu la'olam v'ed. Baruch Atah Hashem Ma'ariv Aravim. Everybody says Amen, and now we sit down to learn Daf Beis in Masechtas Nazir. That's the way Parson al Shema of Ma'ariv would look according to the Mechaber. In the world of the Ramah, there would be a very big difference. In the world of the Ramah, you don't need to say the first bracha of Birchas Kriya Shema in order to have a sufficient response to Baruch Hu. All you need is Baruch Hashem HaMavarach La'olam V'ed. So what would Parson al Shema by Ma'ariv look like in the world of the Ramah? Very simple. The 10 people come for the daf yomi shir. We all daven b'yechidus. Oh, we need a Baruch Hu. Give a clap. Baruch Hu Hashem HaMavarach. Baruch Hashem HaMavarach La'olam V'ed. Zehu. That's Parson al Shema by Ma'ariv. Okay, so against that backdrop, let's take a look now at the words of the Ramah together with the words of the Mishnah Berurah. I'm going to go back into the Ramah. The Ramah said, Yesh oimrim sheparsin b'Kriya Shema shal arvis kimoi b'shachris. There are those that say that we have a halacha of Parson al Shema by Ma'ariv the same way we do by Shachris, and I just explained that to you, and we read already Mishnah Berurah Ois Cotton. No, we didn't read Mishnah Berurah Ois Cotton Hey. Let's quickly read Mishnah Berurah Ois Cotton Hey. Kimoi b'shachris ritzoinoi loymar. We're going to plug it in to the Mechaber's picture of Parson al Shema of Shachris, meaning Afim Kulam Kfar Hispalalu Kalecha B'fnei Atzmai. We're talking about 10 people who already davened b'yechidus, and now they showed up at shul for the daf yomi shir, so they'll be Parson al Shema. Now let's go back into the Ramah. But says the Ramah, V'loi nohagu kein. But we are not noyig to do this by Ma'ariv. Why? Mishum daleka kaddish koidim baruch hu shel arvis. Says the Ramah, we're not Paras al Shema by Ma'ariv. You know why? Because the only davar shebekdusha that we're trying to make up by Ma'ariv is Baruch Hu. We're not trying to make up a Kaddish. Like I told you, whether you daven Ashkenaz, if you daven Ashkenaz, there is no Chasi Kaddish before Baruch Hu. Even if you daven Sfard, the Baruch Hu is only a recent minute. So we're not trying to make up that Kaddish. So what are we trying to make up? We're only trying to make up Baruch Hu. And if you're Parsal Shema, what are you going to do? All you're going to do is Baruch Hashem HaMavarech, Baruch Hashem HaMavarech Leilam Vayed. Says the Mishnah Berurah, take a look at Mishnah Berurah's Katan Vav. V'loi no'agu kein. You know what? I want to do this a little bit different. Okay? Let's skip to Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Zayin. I want to put it in chronological order. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Katan Zayin, Deleka Kaddish, Umishum Baruch L'chudei Loi Kaptinon Kol Kach. Note what the Mishnah Berurah is saying. Why does the Ramah say, and he brings this down, by the way, in the Shar Tzion, Ois Katan Hey, he brings this down from the Magen Avram. This is not his own. He says, why does the Ramah say that nowadays we're not Peiris al Shema by Ma'ariv? Because all we're trying to gain is Baruch Hu, Umishum Baruch Hu L'chudei, for Baruch Hu alone, Loi Kaptinon, I lost the place here, Loi Kaptinon Kolkach. We're not so makpid that we have to go be Peiris al Shema in order to just gain Baruch Hu Hashem HaMavarech, Baruch Hashem HaMavarech Leilam Vayed. If there would be a Kaddish involved, Kaddish, Rabbi say, is more chashuv than Baruch Hu. A lot of people don't think that way. Kaddish is more chashuv than Baruch Hu. So if there would be a Kaddish involved, then yes, we would be Peiris al Shema so that we could say a few psukim, give a clap, say a Chati Kaddish, get an Amen Yehesh Me Rabbah, get a Damir and Balma Vimro Amen, and then a Baruch Hu. For that, we would do it. But there is no Kaddish. So for just a Baruch Hu, for just Baruch Hu Hashem HaMavarech, Baruch Hashem HaMavarech Leilam Vayed, for that alone, we're not going to be Peiris al Shema. So says the Mishnah Berurah in the name of the Magen Avram in Ois Katan Zayin, Umishum Baruch Hu L'chudei Loi Kaptinon Kol Kach. Now, I want you to realize, the Mishnah Berurah doesn't say that there's any Isser. He just says, Loi Kaptinon Kol Kach. That's one thing I want to point out. The other thing I want to be very careful to point out, many of you right now might be thinking of those people who come into shul after Ma'ariv. They came late to Ma'ariv, they missed Baruch Hu. And after Ma'ariv, they give a clap, Baruch Hashem HaMavarech, Baruch Hashem HaMavarech Leilam Vayed. That's not the case that we're talking about here. That's not the case that we're talking about here. In that case, everybody davened already with a minyan. Everybody finished Ma'ariv. This guy missed Baruch Hu, so he wants to get Baruch Hu. So he's giving a clap, Baruch Hu Hashem HaMavarech. That's not the case that we're talking about here. The case that we're talking about here is you have 10 people. No, I'm sorry, I misspoke. The case that we're talking about here is, you have 10 people who all davened b'yechidus. None of them got Baruch Hu. You have 10 people who davened b'yechidus, none of them got Baruch Hu. So they're going to say Baruch Hu, they're going to be Peiris al Shema, they're going to say Baruch Hu, and they're all going to answer Baruch Hashem HaMavarech Leilam Vayed. The fellow who comes into shul after Ma'ariv, it's again, they all davened already. I guess it is the same case. They all davened already, but they didn't all daven b'yechidus. He's the only one who needs a Baruch Hu. Everybody else davened and they all got a Baruch Hu. So we'll have to talk about that. But I misspoke. I thought it was different, but it's not. It is relatively a similar case. Okay, continues the Chavetz Chaim here in Ois Katan Zayin. V'af agav de b'ktas b'koymois oimrim shloisha b'sukim v'kadish koydem Baruch Hu b'arvis. Even though, like I said in Nusach Sfard, there is a Chatzi Kaddish before Baruch Hu. Zeu rak minig ba'alma. It's a stam minig. V'loi kaptinan b'ay Kaddish. We're not trying to make up that Kaddish. Mashe enke Kaddish acher yishtabach shachris. This is in contrast to Shachris, the Chatzi Kaddish before Baruch Hu that we're trying to make up. Hu minig kadmoinim. That's a minig kadmoinim. That's a davar shebekdusha that we have to make up. Kaptinan tvei. We're more makpid on that. Now let's go back to Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Vav. So what do we have here so far? We have here the Ramah introduced us to the concept of being Peiris al Shema by Ma'ariv. And we understand that that's going to look different whether you paskin like the Mechaber or you paskin like the Ramah. If you paskin like the Mechaber, being Paris al Shema by Ma'ariv is going to include the one who's being Paris al Shema having to say the brach of Ma'ariv Ravim out loud in order to have an adequate response to Baruch Leis Hashem HaMavorach. In the world of the Ramah, we don't need the brach of Ma'ariv Ravim out loud because Baruch Hashem HaMavorach Leilam Vayed is a sufficient response to Baruch Hu. So in the world of the Ramah, which is what we're concentrating on now, Parson al Shema by Ma'ariv would simply mean Baruch Leis Hashem HaMavorach, Baruch Hashem HaMavorach Leilam Vayed, and the Ramah said we don't do it. Why don't we do it? Because for Baruch Hu alone, loy kaptin on kolkach. Now, let's take a look at Mishnah Berurah is Katan Vav. Says the Mishnah Berurah is Katan Vav, v'loy noagu kain. Okay. Kas of a prima gadim. The prima gadim says a very interesting thing. Kas of a prima gadim. Nira, it would appear, vadai, for certain, im yesh echad shaloi hispalel adayin ma'ariv. Ooh. The Ramah said we don't do Parson al Shema by Ma'ariv. So the typical case, everybody who it's negated to already davened. So the case that, the Mechaber's case, right? Everybody davened Ma'ariv already. Now, they all davened b'yechidus. Now they're all together for the Daf Yomi Shir. They all davened Ma'ariv. Or the case that you typically see in shul nowadays. Everybody davened Ma'ariv. But one guy came in late, he missed Baruch Hu. So he wants to get a Baruch Hu. But in both of those cases, everybody already davened Ma'ariv. In those cases, the Ramah says, Achshav loy noagu kain. We don't do this Parson al Shema by Ma'ariv. But, says the Prima Gadim, Vadai im yesh echad shaloi hispal adayin Ma'ariv. But if there's somebody who didn't daven Ma'ariv yet, Yochel lamed b'fnei ha'amud, he could get up by the Amud. Im tisha shehispalalu, if there are 9 other people, or 10 other people, or 12 other people, who already davened, and they already got Baruch Hu and everything else. V'yoymar Baruch Hu b'kol ram, he could say Baruch Hu out loud. V'gam yoymar habracha harishayna b'kol ram, and he'll also say Ma'ariv Aravim out loud. He didn't daven yet. So he has to say a Ma'ariv Ravim anyway. So he'll say it out loud. And v'yoytze af la mechaber. And by doing this, you're even being yoytze according to the mechaber's world. Even according to the mechaber, you're having an adequate response to Baruch Hu because you're having the first bracha berachas Kriyas Shema. What is the Prima Gadim saying? And what is the difference between the Prima Gadim's case and the Ramah's case? So again, the Ramah said, we don't do Parson al Shema by Ma'ariv. Why? Because all it's going to gain us is Baruch Hu. But not only all is, so what? So Baruch Hu is a wonderful thing. I think the Ramah is saying, not only is it only going to gain us Baruch Hu, but, I hate to use these words, but I don't know how else to say it, it's almost like a shvacha Baruch Hu. What do I mean? It's a shvacha Baruch Hu. The Ramah definitely agrees with the Mechaber that if somebody says Baruch Hu Hashem HaMavorach and the response to the Baruch Hu is Baruch Hashem HaMavorach L'olam Vayed and Berachas Kriyas Shema, that's a much more robust Baruch Hu than a Baruch Hu that's only answered with Baruch Hashem HaMavorach L'olam Vayed. Right? The Ramah is not going to disagree with that. That's a very basic, simple thing to understand. If you have a choice between Baruch Hu Hashem HaMavorach and the response to it is Baruch Hashem HaMavorach L'olam Vayed and at least the first bracha berachas Kriyas Shema, that's much more robust than Baruch Hu Hashem HaMavorach, Baruch Hashem HaMavorach L'olam Vayed. The difference between the Ramah and the Mechaber is, like I told you earlier, the Ramah has a bias against going out and saying the first bracha berachas Kriyas Shema a second time where it doesn't seem really to be called for. So why are you doing it? Shalom merci kekaifer? Says the Ramah, if you say Baruch Hashem HaMavarech L'Olam Va'ed, you're already not Mechsi K'Kofer. But that just means that Baruch Hashem HaMavarech L'Olam Va'ed is minimal requirements. Therefore, says the Ramah, I believe this is Pshat in the Ramah. Therefore, says the Ramah, you want to be Pyrus al Shema by Ma'ariv? You're not gaining a Kaddish. What are you gaining? You're gaining Baruch Hashem HaMavarech, Baruch Hashem HaMavarech L'Olam Va'ed. Shvach HaMaisis. For that, you're going to be Pyrus al Shema? Says the Ramah, we don't do it. Because for Baruch alone, like up to the Kokach. But, says the Pri Megadim, how about if we could make it more robust? How are we going to make it more robust? I'll tell you. What if there's somebody who didn't daven Ma'ariv yet? Not the case that goes on in shul nowadays, where everybody davened the Ma'ariv. Just as one guy who missed Baruch Hu, so he wants to get a Baruch Hu. Baruch Hashem HaMavarech, Baruch Hashem HaMavarech L'Olam Va'ed, and he leaves. No, not that case. There's somebody who missed Ma'ariv in Gansen. He came in after Ma'ariv. So this guy has to daven Ma'ariv. He has to say B'rchas Kriya Shema. Oh, says the Pri Megadim, in that case you could be Pyrus al Shema. In that case, let this guy give a clap. Let him say Baruch Hu. Everybody will answer Baruch Hashem HaMavarech L'Olam Va'ed. And not only that, now he'll say, he has to daven. So he'll say the first bracha, B'rchas Kriya Shema, he'll say Ma'ariv Aravim out loud. So there'll be a very robust response to Baruch Hu Hashem HaMavarech. And then he'll go on and he'll finish his Ma'ariv. That, says the Pri Megadim, that you should certainly do. Why? Because it's now it's not just for a simple Baruch Hu Hashem HaMavarech, Baruch Hashem HaMavarech L'Olam Va'ed. Now it's Baruch Hu Hashem HaMavarech, Baruch Hashem HaMavarech L'Olam Va'ed, and he's going to say B'rchas Kriya Shema out loud, and everybody is going to listen, and they're going to say Amen, Shemea Ka'ina. So now it's a rich Baruch Hu. It's a robust Baruch Hu with a robust response. Says the Pri Megadim, that you could certainly do. And the Aruch HaShulchan says also, that is a minig, he says nowadays, and that you could certainly do. This minig that we see at shul, where somebody just gives a klap, Baruch Hu Hashem HaMavarech, Baruch Hashem HaMavarech L'Olam Va'ed, that I'm not seeing a makar for. That seems to be what the Ramah says we don't do. V'achshav lo nagu kain. Now, I didn't research it. Poik chazim ayam adabar, the minig of the Welt is very powerful. I'm not saying that there's no source. I mean, there is a source, right? It's a kolboy. It's a Beis Yosef in the name of the Ran. But the Ramah says, v'lo nagu kain. Now, continues the Mishnah Berurah. And the Mishnah Berurah says that in this case of the Pri Megadim, where you're going to be Pyrus al Shema, this one person who didn't daven Ma'ariv yet, the Efsher de Yuchal Loimer Gamken Akadish Akaidim Shemana Esrei. Says the Mishnah Berurah, it could be that this one fellow who didn't daven yet, if when he gets up to Shemana Esrei, there's still a minion in the room, he could give a clap and say Chatzi Kaddish. So you get in a Kaddish before Shemana Esrei. Ad Kan L'Shaynai. Okay, Ois Kat and Zayin we did. Okay, that finishes the Ramah. Okay, I hope that everybody is following this. It's a fascinating topic over here. Now we go back to the Shulchan Aruch, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down near the end of the line. So now we're continuing the words of the Mechaber. Now we're diving back into being Pyrus al Shema by Shachris. And let's remind ourselves, the case of the Mechaber was 10 people all daven Shachris b'Yechidus. Now they find themselves all together in shul. They want to get Chatzi Kaddish, Baruch Hu, and Kedusha. So they're going to be Pyrus al Shema. How are they going to be Pyrus al Shema? So what the Mechaber told us before the Ramah interjected, he told us that, okay, what they'll do is one guy will get up, he'll give a clap, they'll say a few psukim, then they'll say Chatzi Kaddish. After Chatzi Kaddish, they'll say Baruch Hu. After Baruch Hu, the one who's being Pyrus al Shema will say the first bracha of B'rchas Kriya Shema out loud. Then, that's what we're up to now in the Mechaber. Then, After this chazan who's being paras al shema finishes saying the first bracha birchas kriyishma, Omer, he'll say avos ugevuros ukedusha. He'll say the first two brachas of Shemona Esrei, Magen Avram and Mechaya Mesim, that's gevuros, ukedusha, and then the olam will say kedusha together, and then va'ata kadosh, and then he'll say va'ata kadosh. V'zen nikra over lifnei hateva. This little miniature Chazar Sashatz is what we refer to as over lifnei hateva, getting up in front of the teva. The teva is the Aron Kodesh. Okay. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Ches, Ukedusha. Ayin Behaga. The Mishnah Berurah gives us a heads up. And I would say we're going to see it later today, but I don't know. On Amid Beis, the Ramah says, the Mechaber says over here that the one who's being Paras al Shema says a miniature Chazar Sashatz. All he does is Magen Avram, Mechaya Mesim, Kedusha, and Atakadosh. And from the words of the Mechaber, it sounds like that's it. After he says Hakel HaKadosh, he walks out of Shemona Esrei, and he's done. Says the Ramah on Amid Beis, no. That's what he says out loud. But he has to finish the Shemona Esrei. We never find a Shemona Esrei that's only 3 brachas. We never find a Chazar Sashatz that's only 3 brachas. Right? When we do a Hoiche Kedusha by Mincha, what do? The Chazan says the first 3 brachas out loud, but he says the rest of Shemona Esrei quietly. So we don't have a precedent for such a thing, saying B'tzibur just the first 3 brachas of Shemona Esrei. So the Ramah says on Amid Beis, he says, no. That's what he says out loud. He has to say the rest quietly. That's what the Mishnah Berurah is referring to here. Nice cut ches. Ayin ba'agab b'samach shebesaim kol hatfila gamke. V'ayin le'el b'sif cut aleph. Now he reminds us of what we learned yesterday in Mishnah Berurah is cut aleph. The dasar advaz the ein linig din over lefnei teva elim ken yesh be'am al kol panim echad shelo yispal adayin. He's reminding us the Radvaz took great issue with this Mechaber and said, what, we have 10 people who all already davened chakras, and now we're making up Epes HaChazar Sashatz over here for them later? The Radvaz says it's a bracha l'vatala. Unless you have one person who didn't daven yet. If you have one person who didn't daven yet, so fine. So he could be the chazan. And he'll go daven Shemona Esrei. He'll do the first 3 brachas out loud, and you'll gain a kedusha, and then he'll finish Shemona Esrei. But if everybody davened already, you can't do this. The Radvaz says it's a bracha l'vatala. The cause of a Magen Avram, the Magen Avram writes, Miu nearly, however it seems to me, Dim ein sham shisha shaloi hispalalu. He says like this. He says, in our case that we're talking about, that's the Mechaber's case, you have all 10 people already davened. Right? They all davened, and now they're all in shul together. Says the Magen Avram, in such a case, where you don't have at least 6 people who didn't daven yet, lo yispalel shliach tzibur balachash. Realize that this fellow who's being Paras al Shema, he's just going to get up, say Chatzi Kaddish, Baruch Hu, the first bracha of Berachas Kriyishma, and then right away, he's going to daven out loud. He's going to say the first 3 brachas of Shemona Esrei out loud to give you a Kedusha, and then according to the Ramah, he's going to finish Shemona Esrei quietly. But don't make a mistake and think that first he should get up and daven a shtil Shemona Esrei, and then say a Chazar Sashatz. No, he already davened his shtil Shemona Esrei. So says the Magen Avram, realize that. He says, Im ein sham shisha shelo yispalalu, lo yispal shliach tzibur balachash, rak yaschil miyad b'kol ram. The ha'ikar kavana b'chazar bazeh hu rak mishum kedusha. You're only doing this to get a kedusha. There's no reason to say another shtil Shemona Esrei. V'yomer ha'shalosh rishonos b'kol ram. The first 3 brachas he's going to say out loud. V'ashar balachash, and the rest will say quietly. Avol kisheyesh roiv minyan. But if you have a situation where you have 6 people in shul who didn't daven yet, and you want to be mitzdaref another 4 people who already davened, now you have a minyan. Now you have roiv minyan. Now daven in the normal way. That's k'moy tzibur gamur. Avol kisheyesh roiv minyan, hein k'moy tzibur gamur. Now you would daven in the perfectly normal way. Everybody would daven Shtil Shemona Esrei together, and then they would make a regular Chazaras Hashatz. Vayin bebir halacha. Ois cotton test nikra over lefnei ateva. This Chazaras Hashatz is called being over lefnei ateva. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Vein zem matzui kayom. It's not common that this whole scenario would happen nowadays. Mishum derigila lifreis al shema b'shvil ha-masakrid lavoi achar gemar siyum shmona esrei balachash. Says the Mishnah Berurah, you're not going to see this nowadays. Because, at least in his days, the Chavetz Chaim says, the minig of being paris al shema is like the first minig that the Chavetz Chaim mentioned in his Akdama. The minig of being paris al shema was that when you finished the Shtil Shmona Esrei, you said, okay, now we're going to make an accommodation for the people who came late. We'll say a Chatzi Kaddish Baruch Hu, the first bracha of Berachas Kriya Shema, and then we'll go into the regular Chazaras Hashatz, which is what we're up to. Kaidim Shemaskal, Shlech Tzibah Tfilah, B'Kol Ram, V'yoytzim Al Yoda, Yinina Kedusha. That's how you'll get Kedusha. He makes a side point here. With Tzrichen Lizar Be'esha Mekaptzid Oz B'Pesach Pesach Knesses Lifreis Al Shema Shal Yavru Neged Mispalalim. I guess when they wanted to be Paris Al Shema, sometimes a lot of people would come in to Chapa Kedusha. He says, be careful that they shouldn't walk in front of people who are still davening Shemona Esrei, a halacha that we're going to learn about later. But even though he says this is not the prevalent meaning nowadays, but he says the halacha is, if somebody comes very late to davening and he misses the whole Chazaras Hashatz and everything, he could do this. He came all the way late. The whole minyan is over, but there are still 10 people there, and now he's davening alone. If he wants to be Paras al Shema, in order to get himself a Chatzi Kaddish, a Baruch Hu, a Kedusha, he could. Okay, wow. I thought we were going to get a lot further, but I took the time to try and explain this well. I hope I did. So we're going to stop over here, and we'll continue next time here at Hashem, 3 lines from the bottom, the end of the line, Ve'ein Oisim. What an interesting topic. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. Discussing limud HaTorah should be megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua's and Fuhas Parnasah Shedukrim to all those in need, and we should be zeicher to see the B'Yeskel Tzedek B'Meher V'Yameinu. Amen. Be well.